Okay, we're back. So we're going to be focusing on task two, and of course, everything else. I've done this presentation a couple of times with groups, like workshop style live. I'm never quite sure how I'm able to get through it all in one go, but I think because I'm not doing this live, that could be why my brain is kind of allowing me to get tired. Because when we do this live, we go through it, and it is intense. I'm literally like cheering people on and doing pep talks like, you got this, hang on. Anyway, we're here and we're focusing on task two. Now, a lot of you tend to be very nervous about task two. Task two really is like the task that you need to be least worried about. Now, I know you're nervous because you have to be recorded, but this isn't going on YouTube, right? Please don't put it on YouTube. Even if even if you think your teaching was great, you're not allowed to. So don't let your don't let your hyperfixation, I'm going to call it that because that's what it is, on the fact that you're going to be on a video and recorded, have be the reason that you just like totally fumble task two, right? I see some people, they're like ready to throw up, like, well, I'm going to be on camera. And like the same like 20, 30 kids, 10 kids even that you were teaching, they were still there regardless, right? I think that's more nerve wracking, just being in a classroom full of real children that they don't care whether you're a student teacher or not. They need your attention and care. The camera's just a little fun element. So I really say this to say that if you're heavily overthinking, you're going to make this so much harder for yourself. Now, I do have some tips. I did clear out like everything on my computer just to kind of make it a little bit faster. We'll see if it actually does that, right? Now, I can't show you the videos, right? I mean, think about any video where someone does record themselves teaching. And just as a note for when you're teaching in your career, whatever, be mindful that not everyone wants their kids on TikTok or YouTube or whatever social media site you're using. You always need permission. And even if you think you go to the most chill school and you're going to record a day in the life video, be very careful. Do not show those kids' faces unless you magically get every parent to agree to have you record and post that online, which I don't recommend for safety reasons. I just wouldn't. Please don't. But anyway, that was a non-TPA note. So yeah, I can't show you the videos that I of like a client that's done this, but of course we will look at the commentary and everything else. So tips for the videos. Be aware of the amount of clips you need and what needs to be in them. If it says you need 2 clips, you need 2 clips. If it says you need 3 clips, you need 3 clips. If it says something is optional, then that thing is optional. It's not up for interpretation no matter how much you overthink. Again, if it sounds like I'm being harsh, I have seen every type of misinterpretation of things that are very clearly laid out possible. What it says is what goes. Now, the time. If it says you need 2 clips and they can't be more, and they can be a max of 20 minutes, but neither clip can be less than 3. That means of your 2 clips, they each have to be at least 3 minutes or whatever it says in your handbook, right? And total, they can't go over 20 minutes. Don't overthink it. What it says is what it says. Your videos can't be edited though. So you're not going to edit it like a YouTube video or a TikTok, right? You're going to record the whole lesson because you could think like, well, I'm going to do great in the end of the lesson, so that's what I'm only going to record. You have no idea. You might actually have a segment that's even better that happened 10 minutes before that point that you thought was great. Record everything. You can record on your phone. You don't need a camera or fancy equipment. Just make sure that your phone has the space. And I recommend seeing that it has the space before you go to teach. So what I tell people is like, pick up your phone, go to like click to record for like 40 minutes, but then just hold it face down like at home and see if your phone actually lets you record it all the way through. And then of course, delete that, go into your recently deleted. If you have an iPhone, make sure it's fully gone so you actually have the space. And make sure your phone is on do not disturb when you're recording. I think airplane mode, it might give you some issues. So I wouldn't recommend that. But if you have an iPhone or whatever phone you have, put it on do not disturb. Because when a call comes through, if a call comes through, it will stop the recording and it won't let you know that it stopped the recording. But yeah, your videos can't be edited. So you're going to record everything. And then when you're reviewing the footage, say you have a 40-minute video, but you're like, wow, 9 minutes to 14 minutes looks really good. You're just going to slice it out like a slice of a cake. You're not going to dice it up and put it together. You're just taking out that one slice, right? And that's what you have, that one piece. Or like, you have to submit whatever amount of clips you have to submit. When you record, your videos have to be ideally between 200 and 300 megabytes or less. I believe the max is 300. You're going to compress it with the Handbrake app, and I have a picture that's going to show you on the next slide. And this basically makes it so that your video quality stays the same, but it's easy to upload. It's not too large. Ideally, you don't have to if your video is small, but if you have an issue where your video is very large or whatever, or you're noticing that it's compressing, but it's still like 800 megabytes, when you go to compress, click the button for web optimization, and that will make it smaller. It's okay if the video isn't like totally crisp clear. They just need to be able to see your face. Your students need to be seen that they exist. I've seen people say like, oh, they need to see all of their faces, as long as the kids are there, right? See the side of them. I think a side angle is good for when you're recording, but yeah, and make sure you're aware of how many students need to be in each video. So like, for example, I've seen special ed clients who they don't just do it with their one student, they do it with a small group, but they focus on their one student that they're doing for their portfolio. Or if you have a certain portfolio type where it's a small group, see what the requirements are in your handbook for a small group. I think for elementary, for you guys, it's for you all, you need to have like at least 4 or something like that for if you're doing like a whole group. And small group it's pretty similar, but like more than one. Yeah, let's see what else. Anything else? You don't need to blur out the students or their faces or their sweatshirts. If they have a name tag, that's fine, unless there's some sort of extenuating circumstance. And there rarely is. And I say this because sometimes I've seen some of you think that there's an extenuating circumstance, and there isn't. So you don't need to blur them out. If you did need to blur anything out, or even add like transcriptions or translations, you could go on YouTube Studio, and basically you upload the video as if you're uploading it to YouTube. Don't upload it though, or just like make it private. And YouTube Studio will let you blur and do things like that. Now, if you have things that happen in another language or things that can't be clearly heard, you can add in like a subtitle at that point, or you can also transcribe that piece in your commentary. Again, typically you won't need to do that. If your specific platform is Sibme, I've heard you guys say it different ways. Sibme. If you have that, your videos, as far as I've seen, can't be over 250 megabytes each. That's separate from Pearson, but just like if you're uploading to your school's platform and it's Sibme and you're uploading to Pearson, Sibme is a little strict. So be mindful of that. This is what it looks like when you go on Handbrake. So you're going to download it. It's handbrake.fr. I believe that's the website. All you're going to do is you're going to click open source to add your video, like find the video that you want, and then you're going to click start. That's it. Or if you're going to click web optimization, you would go, I think it's in like the video. I think it's either in the video section or it shows up once it starts to like work, right? But typically you click open source in the top left and then the green start button. And then when it's done, you'll see the pineapple kind of jump when you're on dashboard if you have like a MacBook. PC, you guys are fine for Handbrake. Chromebooks are the only one where, and when this Mac broke once upon a time, like 2 years ago or last year, I think 2 years ago now, I had to use Handbrake, and then I learned that Handbrake wasn't accessible for Chromebook. I forget what I used, but I do know it was a pain. if you do have a Chromebook and you're watching this and you're like, well, what do I use? Well, first see if your video is small enough anyway, you might be fine. You can also compress your video on your phone. There are apps for that, and then upload it to like Google Drive or whatever to get it onto your computer. But if you still can't figure it out, feel free to like leave me a comment, and I'll comment below, and will do some research and get back to you on that. So some notes on the instructional commentary. So this is called the instructional commentary because now you've already taught your lessons. This is written as well as the next, the subsequent tasks are written in the past tense. You can only focus on what you did in your videos for this, which I know is really annoying because you're like, oh, man, like I had this good clip, but I also did something really cool later. Doesn't really matter. Sorry. That's it. You can only focus on what's in your videos. And you want to provide timestamps and explanations. So of course, I'll show you an example of this. Ideally, the way you can set this up is you want to provide 3 to 5 timestamps per video discussing what happened in the timestamp, how it connects to the question you're asking, and how this is what you did or what happened was beneficial for the students, like in general, or for learning that skill that you're learning, right? So when you do that and you have that format for each video clip, you'll find that this goes very, very, very quickly. So what I've done with clients is, and what I recommend a lot of you do is, okay, you've recorded your videos. Now you're like, okay, well, do I have to go back and forth to find the timestamps? I don't recommend that, and I don't think that's time efficient. What you're gonna do is you're gonna pull up your video on one side of your screen. On the other side of your screen, you're gonna pull up a blank document. See if you can, and you might need to kind of hover over and go back and forth a little bit with this in terms of like where you slide your mouse. Not see if, you are going to annotate everything that happens in your videos, right? Everything. It's going to say, and your list is going to say, okay, starting at 00 to 0:15 seconds, the teacher or I, ideally you can say I to make it easier for yourself, I tell the students this, and the student responds to this. Every little thing, not just the things you think are notable, you're basically going to annotate everything. Now, don't do this for like the entire 40 minutes. You're going to look and see what kind of makes the most sense to keep per video. Mind you, your videos don't have to be perfect. Your students don't have to be perfect. I've seen some people say, like, my student was kind of rolling around a bit. Well, you're teaching a kindergarten class, or you're teaching like pre-K, like 4-year-olds do that. Oh, but like, I don't like the way my blazer looked. That's not being scored. What's being scored is your ability to effectively teach, right? And that's written about in your commentary. So when it comes to picking your video clips, don't get too freaked out that you end up not picking something or you're overthinking. Pick one clip where, depending on your portfolio type, one clip where you're seeing like kind of doing that guided practice where the students are, you're explaining the concept, and there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of discourse, and then another clip, ideally where the students are practicing the concept, but with you. They're not just like writing at their desk silently, right? I would also recommend making sure that you have a lot of, when you're teaching this, a lot of whys, a lot of having the students explain themselves a lot, almost to the point where it's annoying. They say, oh, well, this is the main character. Why? How do you know? Oh, I believe that this political law, if you're doing secondary history, from the 1850s was incorrect. Why? Where did you get that judgment from? Where in the text did you see that? Every time the students open their mouth, you basically want them to form that discourse with you, right? And that's going to give you a lot to work with when you get to your commentary. So that's why I recommend you do it. So now let's look at a sample task 2 commentary. Now, for the most part, these commentaries are set up almost exactly the same across the portfolios, with the exception of asking like about multimodal learning for early childhood, I believe, inquiry and argument and analysis for secondary history, like little specific things, but the base, of course, is still the same. And the way you're going to approach it is the same no matter what. Question 1 is the only cert question you get. You're going to say what each video was. Question 2. So this question is asking you, how did you create a positive learning environment? So this is less about like, oh, here's what I taught, and here's how the students knew the concept. and more about how you made the environment warm, welcoming, like in terms of your teaching methods and styles, how you encourage learning, encourage participation, right? Also keep in mind, I want to reiterate, the reason why we were able to type so much is because my client and I, we had that full list where we go back and forth, like we picked a couple minutes for video 1, a couple minutes for video 2, and then annotated every single thing she did. So then once we had that list of every single thing she did, when we got to the questions, or before we actually started writing it, we took the list and I would say, okay, we're gonna highlight and copy and paste like 3 to 5 from video 1 and question part A, 3 to 5 from video 2 and part B. And then we would just copy and paste the timestamps that we wanted. Yes, you can repeat them in each question. And then all we had to do now was, once we did that for the whole thing, go back up and just explain each timestamp. You will see the quickest I've ever had someone get this done, and we did it in real time. This is like during the pandemic, actually. And no, that did not make it easier. That made it a lot harder. We got this done in like an hour and 15 minutes, the whole thing. We were just flowing. We had the timestamps. It was boom, 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 done. So you can see, for example, we said in video 1, and we bolded the title of the video, we name a timestamp. First, we say what happened in the timestamp. So from 103 to 125, I was doing the read aloud blank. So that kind of explains what happened. Then we said how it connects to the question. I demonstrated responsiveness, so that was mentioned in the question, for my student needs, because it helped them connect the vocabulary terms with visuals, right? And how did this benefit the students? This benefit the students as it allowed them to be able to better identify characters and key elements of fiction in real time, right? So we did that 3-part formula. Sometimes that 3-part formula doesn't always apply, but you'll see that it helps you just breeze through this in a very straightforward way. And of course, you can always add in that some of these methods will of course help the students better understand their learning objectives, right? Additionally, if you have students with specific needs, like English language learners, you can mention them throughout. Respect for student as well is also saying their name, acknowledging them, giving them high fives, repeating a question out loud so everyone can hear. I mean, think about if you were like a kid in the classroom, what would you want to experience that so that you feel like you exist and that the teacher's not ignoring your existence, right? You state a response and you say it, and then you repeat that response to the whole class, or the kid, right, says a response, and then you as the teacher repeat it to the whole class. So that validates the student. Good jobs and praise. Little praise like that, that's a form of respect and rapport for students. What else? The way you set up the lessons, like, oh, I added in this game and that's rapport, because I know the students really love that, right? Examples like that. Engaging students in learning, this is more literal and focused on the actual academic portion. So how did you get the students to practice that essential literacy strategy and the related skills? For example, we said 448 to 543, they were doing a group learning activity. It engaged the students in the strategy because they had to rely on their understanding so they can comprehend the story and do so appropriately. Then we tied this into another one. So we said, after, within the same timestamp, I stated that our main character was a special character. The usage of the word special was important because my students may not fully understand what main character means, but by giving them the synonym of special, this helps them to better comprehend the idea of a main character. In turn, now this comes back to like what the question was about. This helps them understand how to identify characters for fiction text, right? So that's connecting with what the question was about. And they were then engaged in other skills, etc. So it seems very lengthy, but it's breaking apart the great stuff that you already did. And a lot of times when I'm doing this, a lot of you will say, oh my gosh, like, I didn't know I did that. Like, I didn't know what I was doing was so in depth. Yes, teaching and pedagogy, like, it's already in you. And this is a really cool way to kind of see just how deep the work you do goes, and you don't even realize it, right? Next one is, what is this, 3B? Describe how your instruction links to students' prior academic learning, personal, cultural, community dispositions and assets, and connected to new learning. So we go by video. But this is a little different because we go by video, but also discuss both videos. And another point to mention as well is that sometimes one video will have more examples than another. That's fine. As long as you're just checking off the things that you need to in your rubric, you're good. So an example, we said in both videos, I used high amounts of questioning as I know that my students love to participate and express their thoughts, especially in literacy lessons. They enjoyed sharing their thoughts and understanding about the character. This was also a good way for me to formatively assess the students. Another example, oh, this is a good one. The students were able to see it, or the students were able to see, okay, in this case, how both people and animals can be main characters depending on the context of story. This was important for the students to also differentiate between characters to help identify a main character. So that might have seemed a little bit out of context, but you can see the level of detail that we gave. So all we said here was that we chose a story about pets, and then we explained why the story about pets was chosen and how that connected with the new learning the students were getting. Question 4 is about deepening learning. So this is why I told you guys to really have a lot of critical thinking and higher order questions, a lot of why, how do you know, can you please explain, where did you find that in the text? Because that's all of this. And it becomes a lot more difficult to do this question when you don't have that. So a listening response is what it sounds like. How did you get a response out of the students, deeper than a yes or no, regarding what they're learning? And additionally, how did you build on the responses? So getting a response out of them, building on a response, a student says, yep, so this is the student says, this is the answer to this equation. You say, amazing. What was the first step that you didn't solve in the equation, right? That is building on their response. Instead of them giving the response and you just saying, okay, you ask a follow-up question. That's building. So in essence, that's what that is. And we did that same formula. You can always, of course, pause to read. Listen, I would go through this line by line, but for the sake of time, I actually think we'd be here for like 5 hours. Now for 4B, this is about how you model the essential literacy strategy and supported students as they practice and applied the strategy to comprehend or compose text or something similar depending on what portfolio you have. I'm going to break down what this question is asking because I know it seems very lengthy and I'm not a fan of the wording that they use for it. Basically, it's saying, how did you show the students what they needed to do? Focus on the word model. And I want you to think that as a teacher, everything you're doing should be a case of modeling naturally, right? When you're going up to the board and you're making the anchor charts and you're discussing, you're showing the students like the thought process of how to connect with the topic that they're doing or how to best approach a problem. Math, this is awesome because in math, it's almost kind of rare to present students with new math problems and not show them how to do it first, right? But any way possible that you can show your students what they were, show your students what they're doing, basically, is great, right? And again, you already had that in there, so now it's just now you just need to continue in stating, how do I put this? Now you basically just need to continue in stating all of the different ways that the modeling occurs. See if I can find you all a good example. All of this is a good example, but okay, let's look at this here. This is pretty long, and you do not need to have this long of an explanation. We were just on a roll, and I like the idea of showing you all different ways you can elaborate. So in video 2, we did another activity with placing visuals on a board to represent setting and key events, except this time I placed the visuals on the board myself. So she's stating what she did. Setting and key events are a more involved topic compared to characters, which is why I wanted this activity to be focused on me modeling the essential literacy strategy and these key concepts. Okay, more rationale. In turn, benefit for the students. My students were able to better comprehend these key components. Now, we even explained why it's more abstract, right? Setting is more abstract and more vocabulary specific, because the students may have multiple different interpretations of what a location is. And she actually experienced this, you know. In one case, a student said the location was a home, and another person said, oh, the location isn't just a home, it's a bedroom. Another student said, oh, the location is the kid's bed. Another student said it's inside, right? So regarding characters, they can only be described really, especially for this age, one way. However, with setting, there can be multiple ways to describe a location, and it can be dependent on a student's background, experiences, and vocabulary level. A student can easily interchange, and this was another example we had, school with classroom with desk, which may not be accurate depending on the context, especially for little ones. Sometimes as their schemas are growing, right, they use certain words to make sense of things. A really funny example, when my niece was little, this was like in the countryside where we had lived briefly, and she would point outside and go, oh my gosh, look, a bird, a bird, a bird. And we would look outside and there were turkeys, huge turkeys outside. It's a great example of schema theory for those of you that are going to use it. And technically they were birds, but we were kind of like, that's not the bird you're thinking of. But she didn't have the language. She was like 3-4 years old to say, this is a turkey, or didn't know what that was. So as fun, as silly as that example is, it's a really great way to understand when you especially have little ones, or students that are new to a certain language. Vocabulary shouldn't be taken for granted, and you can model vocabulary. So that was an example we had for modeling, right? Now it's very short. All we did was just place visuals on the board, but the justification was very lengthy for that. You'll find that naturally everything you do in teaching, you could, not saying you will in this case, but you could really talk about it for a while. And the last question, analyzing teaching. So this is all about what you would or could or wish you could have done in your videos and why. For 5A, I only want you to talk about the what. Try to stray as much as you can away from why, but so you want to say what you would have changed or what you could improve on, and give details of what that would look like, right? Then in 5B, that's where you bring up those same points you mentioned in 5A and go, well, here's the reason for that. Here's the benefit of doing that. Here's the theory this connects with. Here's how this would improve learning. So for example, and I want you to think, like, even if your videos went perfectly, think about like, oh, if I had more space, if I had more time, what would I have done? And again, you're not focusing on what you actually taught. You're kind of imagining things now. If I had more time, I would have done this, or I would have taken the lesson to this location, like the auditorium. I could have utilized more manipulatives. I could have, from this timestamp, I could have given the student I could have given the student like an opportunity to respond in a more detailed manner instead of allowing them to have a yes or no response. I could have validated the student more. There's so many ways you can put it. So you kind of want to be excessive. You can roast yourself a little bit, or a lot actually. And if by chance you had videos that, not like you're being hard on yourself and the videos weren't great, but in retrospect, you're like, wow, I kind of just read a book for 30 minutes and I didn't even let the students speak. I had a client like that come to me during the pandemic, and she was like, listen, I know it's bad. All we did was read and the students didn't even talk. We had to go very intensely into depth with this question. Because this shows your score that you are willing to learn and that you're aware of places for growth and that you understand pedagogy enough to know, okay, here's what I did in the video. I was nervous. I can acknowledge what needs to be improved upon. And that's how you save yourself, and you save yourself a lot of points. So, you can pause to read. Or else we'll be here all day. We've got a couple different examples, right? And then again, we justified the examples. So like from 120, 152 to 215, I could have considered adding more student-to-student interaction. By having this activity, there would have been more student connection. The students would have had an opportunity to show more evidence of comprehension. And this would also have benefited the English language learners because, right? Those are the last two questions, and that's it. So that's your task 2. Now, We are almost there. For those of you that have 3 tasks, we're about to get to your last task. For those of you that have 4 tasks, we got a little bit more to go. But at the end of this, regardless, I will be discussing how to submit, or like just that whole process. So keep that in mind. Let's see. Task 3, this is all about your assessments, right? So the parts might vary a bit depending on your portfolio type, but these are your general sections. So you are assessing student learning here, right? First, you will have your work samples. This is your evidence of student learning. So typically you'll show this in scanned work samples, which most of you will use, or videos. I recommend if you're trying to scan your work samples, you can just take a picture of it, or you can use the app Adobe Scan or similar scanning apps on your phone, and they'll scan it. Like actually, it looks like it's scanned. They'll scan it for you. Let's see. You can do video work samples. I recommend those work well for students who, for some reason, like couldn't like write or create like or create a written product for you, or like performing arts. I had a performing arts client where, of course, you know, they had like paper work samples, but they needed to show themselves performing. That was a really fun one, right? Things like that. But the majority of you will use written work samples. It just makes the most sense. So you're showing what the students did, not what you did here in this task. This is important, especially if you choose to show video evidence of learning. The video evidence is of the students learning, not of your teaching at all. If you're doing video, typically the video cannot be more than 5 minutes per student, per focus student, but that depends on your commentary. In choosing your focus students, you want to find a pattern of learning, like something that the students all maybe got wrong, something that the students are all confused on, maybe it was something that they were all correct on. So that's how you want to choose your 3 focus students. Don't pick a student whose work sample honestly is like blank and it's just not it, because that's more difficult for you to write about in your commentary. If you wanted to pick a student that was did really well but had that pattern of learning, did kind of average and had that pattern of learning, and struggled quite a bit and had that pattern of learning, go for it. There is always a pattern of learning, even if, again, it was kind of like little seemingly random errors here or there. You can use the pattern of learning based on like what the students all got correct, or like a concept that they all understood. Or not worst case scenario, I don't want to freak you out. Or if that really doesn't seem applicable to you, again, you could do those like tiers of students. And it must all come from the same assessment. If you modified an assessment, like it's the same assessment, same worksheet, but for a student, you had to like take off some questions or whatever, note that clearly on there so that your scorers don't think that this is an entirely different assessment and give you a condition code for it. And it doesn't have to come from the final day for your learning for the edTPA. CalTPA, they're a little bit more strict on that, but it's just whatever works. So let's look at some sample work samples. Okay, you all can see this is moving a lot faster, right? I hope I don't jinx myself by saying that. Work samples you will have separate. So just one student on its own page, on their own page. You can denote anything specific about a student, like if they are a struggling reader. You don't have to, although if you're in California and one of your focus students is an English language learner, list that. Rubric score, you don't need to have a rubric score. We made evaluation criteria, which you'll see in a bit. And then based off of that, we made a rubric for it. Well, the evaluation criteria was a rubric. And we said what the student's score would be from that. And that's it. Student 1, 2, 3. Let's see, what is next? Evidence of feedback. Right. Because she had kindergarten students, she had audio feedback. So what I'm going to do is we'll explain this. I'll show you the evaluation criteria, and then I'm going to show you a different form of evidence of feedback. So If your students can't read, preschool, kindergarten, depending on their special needs, if they're in special ed, then your feedback needs to be audio recorded. This is not, the students don't have to be there for that. You can just go in like the voice message app on your phone, and record for, I believe it's a max of 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Typically you'll get around 30 seconds. And you will, you're going to speak for the, in the voice note or whatever you're using in the audio, as if you're speaking to the student, right? Hey, Billy, yes, you can say their name, because it would sound weird if you were like, hey, student one. Hey, Billy, you did so awesome on your worksheet about finding character traits. Like, you're going to say it like you're speaking to them. I know this isn't what we can do on a daily basis, but again, your scores want to see that you know how to give feedback. You did so awesome in your worksheet. I would love if you are praise first. I love how much effort you put. You made sure to answer every question and make sure the praise is focused around what the student actually did, though, related to the learning objective. You clearly identified 2 of our main characters out of 3. That's so awesome. I love that you remembered Kathy the cat and Danny the dog. Like, right now for a challenge, or I would love if you also worked on, or I noticed that you didn't recognize that Perry the platypus was one of our main characters too, or that you chose this or that. Here's a way we can think about that. What do you think we can do in the future? I would love to see you try this strategy later on, right? So we kind of do like a glow and grow. That's also why I call this glow education, because I've always loved that form of feedback. So you want to give like a glow of what a student did well and a glow of what they could have improved upon. So let's see if I can find an example for you. When was this? Okay, I think this is the one. Let's see. Yes, okay, this is actually the feedback for these students. And what this client and I did was we typed it all out first, and then she used this as a script and recorded it, right? So you can see, for those of you that are just writing this out, which will be 90% of you, you're just going to keep this and write it. So you can don't put their names. We just did this as notes. You can put their rubric score again if you want to. You don't have to, or like the grade they got. You don't have to grade all of these, by the way. I've seen some people ask, like, do they have to grade like all 20 of their students' work? No. Don't do that. Just be aware of how your focus students scored. So pause to read. You can see clearly that we identified exactly what the student did well on, almost to a very like direct or even excessive extent. And then we also clearly identified what the student could have improved upon. And mind you, these are kindergarten students circling characters and settings. We still had a good amount to say though. Okay, that was the feedback. If you did give audio feedback, it's fine if you record it on your phone. The students don't need to be present. You can use this website, freeconverge.com, if you need to change the audio type. If your school's platform is having trouble uploading the file, use the free convert site and click to convert the audio into an MP4 video file. Evaluation criteria. This is how the students would be scored. Now, I want you to stray away from just or only having an answer key. Even if this didn't come with a rubric, right? Like the assessment that you had, or it seems excessive. Again, you're making one to show that you know how to evaluate students. So also make sure that what is in your evaluation criteria only focuses on what relates to your learning objective. If you're doing comprehension or composition, it relates to that, right? So if you're doing something only about comprehension, you can't put spelling up there, because as much as in a typical sense you would grade spelling, that's not what this is focused on. So be very careful, right? You only want to focus on what is necessary not only what is necessary, what you were doing in the context of your edTPA. So do not evaluate this the way you would evaluate typical lessons. You have to have very strict parameters for that. If something doesn't match exactly what you were doing, or it's kind of like, oh, neatness, or maybe things like that, but that don't really match. Like if you were doing art, and I have worked with art candidates before, that might make sense. But yeah, be very careful with what you choose. Now, this is something where you can use like a rubric generator or like ChatGPT if you give it very clear guidelines and tweak it still to help you make a rubric. So you can just give categories. Here, like what are the key things that the students needed to do to complete this worksheet? Okay. Or like there's only 4 questions, what do they need to do for each question? Or however you wanted to do it, right? Students needed to identify the character, identify a setting, and connect character and setting. And we kind of gave a tiered scoring of that. And then what proficient, near proficient, or emerging or needs support means. Right. So we have that. All right. Assessment commentary. You want to write it in the past tense because it already happened. You're only, again, focusing on the one chosen assessment, right? For those focus students. And also keep in mind, if you have a special ed portfolio, you guys, you all don't have 3 focus students, you have less. I believe it's just 1, right? Right, just the 1. Early childhood, you have just 2. So keep that in mind. And then you also want to be very, right, you want to be very specific. So check to see if you focused on explanations versus listing out numbers like, okay, 20% of the class did this and 5% of the students did this. That's not useful. It's a bunch of fluff. But if you say, here's what the students did regarding this question and why I think so, here's some possible theories about what I think, like predictions about why I think they did how they did. Here's common patterns. That is something that's going to be very useful. So let's look at this commentary. I think we put this in a separate section. That's so funny. Right, there we go. I didn't see it. Okay. So in the first question, it's typically going to ask you what objectives were measured by that one assessment. So you're not focusing on the lesson, just that assessment, that worksheet, whatever you had. And then you can state the objectives. This can be very in tune with the evaluation criteria we made. So in question B, it asks you to provide a table or a chart that talks about how the students did in the whole class. What we did, just to kind of make more sense or to streamline it, we took that rubric that we made from the evaluation criteria, and then we just said approximately how many students scored in each category. Now, again, what Pearson only knows what you tell them, right? So don't see this and think, okay, well, oh my gosh, I have to score all 25 work samples. No. Make a number that makes sense. If you have 25 students and you know a good half the class struggled with question 2, you can just say 12. You can say 10. You can say 13. Like, pick a number that makes sense. Do not waste your time for no reason scoring all 30 worksheets. Just don't do that. Now, what you will be specific about is if the focus student scored in a certain category, you can put that there. I've also seen some people do kind of like a table chart and they color code it. I've seen some bar charts. Be wary of that. Pie charts definitely do not recommend. But again, you can also write all of this out, basically. And then we stated how the evaluation criteria, what the evaluation criteria discusses. So we don't talk about what it means and implies yet, just the fact that it's there. And like we're breaking it down as if someone hasn't seen this chart before and they need to know what they're looking at. Now, question C focuses on typically the whole class and the 3 focus students. I know for some of you it switches and it's separate in like 2 different questions, so be careful with this. So basically, how do they do? What do they understand? What didn't they understand? What were the patterns? Did they do well with the essential literacy strategy? If so, like give examples. Did they not? Give examples based on this worksheet, right? I'll give you an example. The students knew how to discern between the um, two types of characters and how to choose the most relevant character to the story. This shows that the students remembered our discussions about a special character and applied it to their understanding. I also believe that the students had to use their critical thinking towards the end of the worksheet. They needed to understand the intention behind the questions, which could have contributed to why the students became confused with the last question, right? So you see a little bit of that, those like predictions there towards the end. The final question showed the main character in two different settings, and many students were challenged by the need to clearly recognize the most appropriate setting connected to the story. And then we explain why. So did they understand the essential literacy strategy, the related skills? You can go question by question, you can go theme by theme, however you want to set this up. Do talk about the whole class and then do another section on the focus students. So basically this looks long, but everything we discussed above, we just like rediscussed it, specifically focusing on the focus students only. And we described a little bit about the focus student's background if it was relevant. Focus student 2 was an English language learner, we said that. Focus student 3 was an advanced student, we explained that. Typically for D, most of you won't have audio or video work samples, but if you do, just answer this question straightforwardly. And you can say like the focus student 1 is on the left in the red shirt, focus student 2, don't say their names, is on the right in the green shirt, focus student 3 is in the center, right? So you can say like it's the girl in this or the boy with that, with the brown hair, and go for it. Okay, this question is rather important, and I feel like a lot of people get tripped up on it. So 2A, you want to not explain, you want to state how your feedback was given, right? So there will be multiple bullet points. One says audio files, one says written text files. I think one might say video. And you, in this case, are permitted to delete the choices that do not apply. So you'll delete them, right? She had audio files for her final form of feedback, so that's what we had. Now, if the video or audio feedback happened in a group, that's where you want to say, oh, like here's how you can listen or see and figure out like which student is which. That wasn't the case for her, so we didn't have that. Most of you won't. Most of you actually will have, this will say written work samples, and this will say like not applicable. In part B, when it talks about the feedback that you provided, a common misconception is to just restate all the feedback that you said. First, I said this, then I said this. You want to kind of summarize the feedback and explain the benefit, right? For example, this form of feedback gives praise and lets the student know exactly what they're doing well on, exactly what they need to improve on and change. This form of feedback challenges the student in this way. It evokes critical thinking. So we're being very specific. We also connected to the student's background. Like in this case, we said the student is very motivated and tries to figure out new concepts. So that's why we gave the student strategies for improvement. And we were specific about that. So you don't just want to restate everything you said in the feedback sheet because your scorers already have that. They can see that. You want to justify what you said in each of those. Now, C, this is a rather abstract question. I do want to make sure that you emphasize connecting the feedback to the learning objectives and connecting the feedback to just your students' ability to grow regarding the content that they were learning or the skill that they were learning. So you're basically going to say, how would you support each focus student in utilizing the feedback and then improving like their knowledge regarding the skill? So you kind of want to go focus student by focus student, right? And discuss how you could meet with the student, how you would discuss the feedback, and like a future activity, like a mini lesson for them to integrate this knowledge and practice and get better. You might find a lot of this is a bit similar for each focus student in the beginning until you get to like the mini activity portion. This is a long one. That's basically the gist of it, but as always, you can pause to read it. This is a super long one. And if this feels very intensive, you can just focus on the paragraph specifically about the 3 students. But we added in a good like 2 paragraphs total of just what we would do, like maybe with the students in a small group, what would be common strategies as well. So you can approach this any way you want, but I do want to emphasize that you should be very, very specific and focus on not just what you would do for the future, but regarding those focus students and the feedback, but tying it all together. Question 3 is evidence of understanding language and use. So this is where you can focus back on the whole class. Typically, people just focus on the students' work samples and just discussing the focus students, maybe the whole class. You can, and I feel like this is becoming more common recently. I've even had clients where we've been doing this a bit more, but you don't have to. If you feel it supports your explanations, you can. You can refer to your task 2 video clips, right? Or, and this for early childhood, I actually think you do have a section that's required for vocabulary use. You can add in a separate video or an additional video of your students using the specific language connected to what they had to do for this assessment or for this lesson. This can be where you can broaden it, right? This is the only question though, where you can go broader outside of just that work sample, right? So you're going to discuss how well the students did the language function. In her case was identify, how well they understood and utilized the vocabulary and key phrases, and how well they utilized, for us, it was discourse, right? So now you can see you're going to have all of these different forms of evidence, if you decide to have different forms of evidence, to discuss when, where, how, and why the language function was used, the vocabulary was used, giving examples and showing what this implies. One example, the students applied their use of the language function again by identifying who this main character was by name and on their own. We gave an example of discourse or keywords. The students also showed discourse usage, as I later had a one-on-one conversation with all of them about what they circled on their worksheet and why they chose it. This allowed them to practice utilizing their academic language and sentences verbally, right? Question 4, I think this is the last question, right? Yeah, it has a lot of parts, I know, or it has a lot in it. So question 4 is about next steps. You are basically going to explain, based on the whole class and 3 focus students, what would or could you teach next? Do not take this literally as an, oh, well, on the next day, or this is what it says in my teacher's manual. No. What would you teach next based on how your students did? Come up with ideas, almost as if you're like writing up a narrative of a lesson plan. So this is all of the what you would do for the whole class, what you would do for the 3 focus students, the story you would read, other activities you would do, ways you would teach it. And the part B is the why. So this was the theory that was newer to me that this client brought up, concept attainment method. I like that one. So you're going to bring up the theory. Why would you teach this next? Why would you teach this in this certain time frame? How does this connect with how the students scored on the assessment? How does this support the focus learners? This is all of the why. A is what you would do next, could do next, no limits. B is why. And if you're wondering what concept attainment method is, we had said concept attainment method focuses on language demands, language function, complex vocabulary, and discourse to strengthen literacy development. It helps bring meaning to concepts to allow the students to construct their own understanding through searching for and exploring common characteristics. Right. Okay, this is your task 3 commentary. Now, task 4 is not required for everyone. If you have an elementary portfolio, there's about a 95% chance you will have a task for it. If you have an option to do a task 4 with only the 3, task 1, 2, and 3, I don't recommend it. I believe the score required for that is much higher. Like you can do it, but it's much higher. So you would fare better doing a 4 task portfolio if you're elementary than 3. For the rest of you, sit tight, and then we'll talk about submitting and everything after. This is also great for those of you who are doing something math-based, because then you can see what a task, what kind of doing some edTPA work math style would look like. Let's see, task 1, 2, 3, 4. So task 4 is kind of like, oh, these are just work samples, a speed run of, not so speedy, but a really detailed version of all of the other, a detailed but condensed version of the other tasks. That's what I want to say, condensed. So you'll notice some key differences. And I don't think, right, that's how I set it up. Okay, so we're just going to go through it piece by piece. Part A is the context for learning. It's the same as the other ones. There's really no difference. The questions are a little bit different because they focus on math. That's it. It's okay if you do a different class for this. You also, and this is not like, this is stated, right? You don't have to teach your common assessment, the whole class assessment for task 4. You do have to teach your re-engagement, but this is the only thing you actually don't have to teach. So that's part A. Part B is a learning segment overview. So this is kind of like summing up the lesson plans. Now, for those of you that have to get this done quickly, what you can do is you can go into your classroom, go to your cooperating teacher, say like, hey, I need some work samples, just take some pictures. Take pictures of regarding what you need in terms of deliverables. You can take pictures of like 2 separate lessons and say, okay, this one came first, this one was the re-engagement, and you take pictures of like 3 work samples for that. That's if you're in a crunch and you can't teach this, or you can't wait for the teacher to teach this. I actually recommend it better. Or doing the re-engagement with them and then just finding worksheets that they've already completed. That would seem like it would be like a precursor to what you did for the re-engagement. But nonetheless, you don't actually have to teach this. You do have to write about it. And there will be a central focus, state standards, and objectives for your 3 to 5, ideally 3 lessons for this. So you see, it's very straightforward. Introduction. We use a smartboard, watch a math video, guided practice. They'll work on questions presented. We'll complete problems together, independent. They'll complete 3 questions on their own. Assessments. During class, they're doing guided activities. At the end, on their own or formally, they'll complete an exit ticket, right? Be mindful of the page limit. This is not meant to be long, so you only have 2 pages. And on the last, one, this is the only thing that I would say has to match. So your formal worksheet assessment would be what your common assessment is. And I'll show you that in a second. So you're going to have a blank copy of your whole class assessment. This is kindergarten, of course. Right? That's it. And then, so that's part C. We have the work, right? We have the work samples. So we have the work samples in, I want to say, a separate part. Well, I'm curious why we did that. Right, I think we had to switch up the work samples a lot in terms of like editing them, because there were multiple pages on these work samples. So let's see if I can show you all some. They're very, right, I remember what we did. So they're very straightforward. You're gonna have 3 focus students and just their work samples, like 1 page. I'm not even gonna bother clicking on these, but that is that. What you can also do is if you have like an iPhone or whatever phone you have your work samples, you can go in and just add text and say focus student 1 mathematics work sample and repeat if you did take pictures. So that was part D. Part E was or actually, I see what we did. We changed the names. A, B, C, right. Okay, we have the work samples. I see exactly what we did now, so I'm sorry for the confusion. the answer key is part D. And it's updated, so that's why it didn't show up. So this is the evaluation criteria, which would also be, there we go, part D, answer key. You don't have to go crazy in depth. What we did was, or answer key or scoring. So we kind of took this very basic looking worksheet, and then we decided to break it down into categories to kind of do like a detailed scoring. Some people I've seen, and I actually did this myself like years ago, can have just posted the answer key and said like, here's how many points everything is worth, and that's fine. But this is just an option for you to see. We decided to ask ChatGPT again, like, hey, can you help us make a scoring assessment breakdown? Of course, we absolutely could have done this on our own. I have helped you guys with thousands of these, but we decided to see like if this resource would be of support to us, and it was. So we basically broke down the major skill sets that were required to complete the questions. Right. So that was D. So my apologies for the confusion. That was D. This is E. E is the work samples, although typically you're going to have to separate them anyway, so just be mindful of that. F is your re-engagement, right? So you can see we just added in the title of the focus student and show the re-engagement worksheet, and you can split those up as well. And then part G, where is that? There we go. That is your commentary. One last commentary. Okay, so the math commentary is longer, but it's not nearly as difficult as task one. It just has a lot of annoying parts. So 1A, you're going to state the learning objective, very straightforward. 1B, you're going to provide a graphic chart or narrative that summarizes student learning for the whole class, just like for task 3. We decided to do it in this way. We kind of still took that like evaluation sheet that we made and then said how many students got a certain amount of points. But there's so many different ways you can do this or write about it. And then we said, okay, based on these points, here's what the different scoring levels were. You do not have to put this. We put this in here. I'm showing you this because there's so many ways you can do this and maneuver it. More isn't necessarily better. We just had some time in our hands to do it. Then if you want underneath your chart, which I do recommend, even though it says like chart or narrative, explain what the chart means and what each category means. Don't explain the implications, but just what it means. Again, this is probably the most intensive we've ever done. I've ever worked with someone on a question like this on one, this is still question 1, right? On 1B, it really does not have to go that hard. We just decided to show it from different perspectives. And I actually like this because realistically speaking, you all can kind of just pick one of these methods to use. More isn't better. We just kind of used all of these and we used it. I remember thinking when we were doing this, that this would make a great sample. So what I want you to focus on is this. This here, so anything similar that shows how the students did, that matters most. And then this, this paragraph here that explains what the chart means. That's what I want you to focus on most. Don't really focus on anything else. Part C can tend to really trip a lot of people up. Conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, and mathematical reasoning are in your math problems. I've seen people say, well, what question works for conceptual understanding? All of them. If you don't understand the concepts, you can't solve the math question, right? What question works for procedural fluency? All of them. If you don't know the steps to solving, you're not going to be able to solve the question. Mathematical reasoning, problem solving skills, that can go really for all the questions because you need to be able to make sense of your work. So all of the questions in your students' worksheets utilize those 3. You just need to explain how and why and if the students were able to utilize those or not. What were the concepts that they needed to understand? For example, we had said, as basic as it sounds, now if you're doing this for like a 6th grade class, saying like they need to understand the concept of addition. Like, yeah, but you want to get more detailed than that at that rate. But in this case, they needed to understand that in addition, numbers get bigger. In this instance, no matter what, or the number's not going down. They needed to understand the concept of a number sentence. They needed to clearly understand the term and is regarding mathematics and regarding addition, right? Procedural fluency. The students needed to understand the steps of solving these problems, such as knowing that the first step was to count the visuals. These are things we take for granted, but especially for kids that are young, very young, every little step matters. Even if they're older, what would be the steps that they needed to do? You can list those out and say what they needed to do and if they understood them. And if they didn't, maybe why not? Again, this is whole class. Mathematical reasoning. Did their problems make sense? Did they use certain helpful strategies, right? If they made errors, like what were the errors and why? Were the errors off by a small margin? Were they off massively? You're then going to do the same thing for question 2. You'll state how you provided work samples, typically written work samples for most of you. Then you're going to do the exact same thing, bring up the same points, but for the focus students. We named a pattern of learning here. We said that the worksheet setup confused the students. This is not a common thing you can say, like you can't just blame it on the worksheet, but this was a worksheet that she was given from her manual. And it was the way it was set up, we actually had a moment where we were like, oh my gosh, these kids were set up to like fail. So we mentioned that there, but we explained why they could have been confused. And we said that it's highly possible that the students felt like they were supposed to do one thing and then they did the other, right? Each focus student, we explained exactly what their strengths and weaknesses were, what their patterns of learning were per question. And again, you can use some of those points that you used in the previous question. If you have video or audio work sample, you can use it, or you can state that it was present. If not, just put not applicable. Next, you're going to, this is about the re-engagement. So you're going to discuss what the learning objective would be. And this doesn't have to be too long. So what would be the learning objective for this re-engagement, right? The re-engagement is teaching the students that struggled a bit, have that same pattern of learning. What would be the objective and why is it the objective? Then in B, you don't need to necessarily go put a paragraph for each. You can if you want. You can lump them together to however you want to do it, but you will need to discuss each of these key points. So you're going to describe a re-engagement lesson. Again, this is not recorded, so just saying. And discuss what you would do or will do in the re-engagement lesson. Future tense. The learning objective is, the standards are, will be, the strategies will be, we'll do these activities, I'll do this for the small group, we'll have these materials, we'll do this worksheet, we'll do this assessment, I might ask these types of questions, right? Now, after this red box, this is all about like after you've taught the re-engagement. You again can say where your work samples occurred. This does not ask you to delete, so don't delete anything. And now you're just stating, it's the last question, right? Whew, you're just stating how effective was the re-engagement. I recommend talking about the general strategies. How did the students, the focus students, 3 of them, benefit or strengthen their conceptual understanding? What changes were made in their procedural understanding based on like what the issues you said were in those earlier questions, the commentary? Do that first in general and mention like, this is more about like your methodologies. Then you can go more in depth. Here's what focus student 1 struggled on. Here's how they did during the re-engagement. Like they worked really well with this strategy, not well with that. And here's how they scored or did better. We even said what the outcomes imply, right? So these outcomes highlight the success of hands-on strategies in fostering procedural accuracy and vocabulary comprehension. We said what focus student 2 struggled with, whether it was procedural fluency, etc. The strategies we used that were helpful and what the outcome was. We also said all of the students showed better mathematical reasoning and what strategies they used to support that. And lastly, if audio video work sample occurs, identify the students, and in this case, it did not. Okay. Now I get to turn on my really fun present mode again, and we're gonna finish this out and we will be done. Oh my gosh, I don't even know what time I started this, but we've been on for a while. Definitely calling this like a full masterclass. Okay. Wait for this to load. So take a deep breath. We've gotten really, really far. You will do great. And yeah, so we've discussed all of these key points. Also, yeah, let's mention this here. Be very careful with making sure that your work samples are the same and not from different assessments again. Right? Okay. Once your work is finished, convert all of your documents into PDFs and make finalized folders. Convert your videos and audio and give you those websites. Get your school/Pearson account ready ASAP. You do not want to be setting up your Pearson account, especially if it's on like submission day, like a deadline day, on the same day that you're submitting. So get that set up. Get your authentication key if you need one. Your school will have it typically. Register if you need a voucher to sign up for the Pearson website. Get your vouchers. Get all of that set. I would say those would be the main things for once you're finished. Also, once you're finished, don't change anything unless you're finished, but you kind of did it on your own, and then you watch this and you're like, oh my gosh, I have things I need to change. Okay. But when it's 11 at night and you're about to submit, please don't submit super late at night. Give it time. But you're about to submit and you're like, well, wait, what if I didn't do enough? That is not grounds to change things. And I've seen people do that and they're not thinking rationally, and then they end up failing, or like they get a condition code because they made really weird, reckless changes in like the middle of the night or whatever time it was, based off of fear. And when you're moving off of fear and anxiety, you will do insane things. I've told everyone that works with me, when we're done, we're done. If you change anything after that, go for it, but not my problem, right? Once you say you're finished, trust yourself and just submit what you have to submit. No last minute, well, what if I just make a big change to this document? Mm-mm. So give yourself more than enough time to submit. It's not hard to submit, it can just be lengthy. If you're submitting directly to Pearson, plan for 40-ish minutes. Honestly, it could even be an hour and 40. It really depends on how the platform's doing. If you're using a second party platform, start the night before / as soon as possible, because you'll upload your documents there and then it'll transfer your documents to the Pearson website and you have no control over how long that transfer will take. Do not change again anything at the very last minute unless you're absolutely 1000% sure of it. And if it's something like, oh, well, I'm just going to add one sentence, that's not going to matter anyway, right? Because your portfolio, what gives you points hinges on much more than just one sentence. Let's see. Right. You can, one thing that this is really cool, and I actually didn't realize this until, I want to say like of the 7-ish years I've been doing this, I think like 2 or 3 years in was when I realized you can upload your documents into the Pearson portal and leave them there. You don't have to like upload them all at once, right? The platform, Pearson's platform, will make you review everything before you submit. So you'll click on the document, right, on the Pearson website, when you're about to submit. Say it's like task 1 context for learning. You click on it, and then it'll take a second to process. So you might need to click off of it and come back. And then you'll know it's ready because it won't say processing. The document will say like ready for review, and it'll have 2 weird, creepy looking eyes. The eyes look like icons from like 90s Microsoft. You're going to click those and then you're going to review the whole thing. You don't have to go slow. If you're sure it's confident, you're good. But they do that so you can't say, oh, well, I didn't know my document looked like that. You have to do it for all of it or it won't let you submit. Your videos, make sure that when you upload them to the website that they play and that they play with sound. And if you had issues with like the time, not issues, if your videos were very close to like the max time limit, make sure there's not a second or 2 added that could throw you over. This was ignore the Thursday, May 1st portion. I made this particular presentation last year. So you must submit before 11:59 on the submission date, not midnight 11:59. Again, don't wait that long. Really give yourself some solid time, just in case you see an issue or anything that pops up, and just for your peace of mind. I would not want to be submitting this late at night. If you have a lot of issues, hold it, wait for later, and just submit for the next window. You're fine. Submit it in a couple of days. If you are submitting on a third-party platform that transfers to Pearson, but you notice an issue on Pearson's website once it transfers over, you have to go back to your third-party platform, re-upload those documents there, and wait for it to re-transfer. And that could take like 30 minutes. So just be mindful of that. Okay, so thank you so much for watching this very extensive masterclass. I am going to rest for a little bit because this was a lot of stuff to go through, and I hope you all rest as well. I mean, I was comfy and cozy, you can see, and still I'm tired. But I do want to just say that no matter how you're feeling through this process, you are a great teacher. Don't let this make you feel like you're not a great teacher. This is just a step on the process of getting your license or your credential, but don't feel discouraged. Take your time, reach out for help, look for resources. If there's specific videos that you all want me to make, I will make them. If you want me to kind of break this down or into parts more, I will make them. I'm going to try to do the YouTube thing where it lets you segment the video, whether you're on your computer or mobile, so that you all can see the different areas ahead of time and not necessarily have to wait to watch through the whole thing to find the part that you want. And please do let me know if you have any questions. For any of you that want any support, myself as well and my team of coaches are also available to help. There's no issue or question that's too big or small. So we are here. And also, I think I'm going to put this in the description box. I have a Substack, and the Substack will list all sorts of tips and things like that, sometimes some really cool offers. So you all are going to do amazing. Please absolutely let me know what you think, if you have any questions, if the video was helpful. And I'm super, super excited to see how you all are doing. Also, we have a new Facebook group. I should have made this group a long time ago, and then I did make it, I think, a year ago and haven't used it. So this will be where you can ask questions, you can come to for support, things like that, and have me in the flesh sort of be able to answer your TPA questions or just share your results. Please share your successes as well and keep in touch. I'm super excited for you all, and best of luck on your TPA journey.